Tan Hut.
Hey, good afternoon. How you doing, Rob? First and foremost, how are you feeling?
I'm doing much better. I got the voice back. The throat feels better. Took a little meds. I tell you, you know what? Teledoc. I know that John and Eric spoke about it earlier today on their show, but man, John suggested it early on, and then Eric walked me through it. One of the most easiest things I ever done in my life. I don't know why anybody in their right mind would ever go back to a doctor again. You can literally get a doctor on the phone, and you get your meds sent right to the CVS by me. Picked them up in a matter of seconds as soon as I got there, and boom, I was. They were kicking in as soon as I got them. So and like Eric says right there, $10 copay, man, you can't beat it. So definitely better than going to one of those urgent cares. Those are like what, $50 copay and stuff like that. The ER's $150. All that crazy money. And literally $10, and I'm speaking to the doctor, and what a professional and nice doctor I spoke to. So yeah, no, doing much better. I feel a lot better. I'm happy to be here. I thank you for taking the lead last time in the last show. I apologize for my sickness. I probably shouldn't even been on, but you did a great job, Ron. You really filled in for me. There were a lot of times where I couldn't even speak, and you filled in, and I really appreciate it. You did a great job.
Hey, no, listen, we're a team. We're a team. We got to look out for each other. And, that thing hit you pretty hard, pretty fast. So we weren't able to really pivot. And then you actually weren't feeling well up through the weekend. And we discussed you might not even be sitting in today. And so we reached out to a friend of the show and a friend of ours personally, retired DI Tony Raganella. And he was going to sit in your seat today for you and step up to the plate. And since you're feeling better, we're still going to bring Tony on to join us in the conversation, because today we're going to talk about a very important topic. We're going to talk about the transition from police officer to sergeant. So being a police officer versus being a sergeant, right? So I think it's the absolute hardest transition in supervisory ranks is to go from police officer to supervisor, to the first line supervisor as a sergeant. And then from lieutenant to captain, what I say would be the next, going into the executive corps. And we're going to have an additional show on that transition and what the expectations of an executive are. But today we're going to talk about the transition police officer to sergeant, what the expectations are of executives from our perspective, but also what it means and what the difference is between being a boss and being a supervisor and a leader. So we'll talk about that and we'll get into that. But first things first, one thing stuck out to me this week. Thankfully, not a ton of things going on in the news for us to talk about. And we'd like to talk about, current events. But one thing that kind of stuck with me a little bit this week was the article about Council Member Susan Zwang. And I know Sal Greco spoke about it on his show yesterday. And I just wanted to mention it and bring it up a little bit. She's the council member that was at a demonstration, and it started to get disorderly. The police had to move in, and they were going to make arrests. And while the police were arresting one individual, the council member interfered with the arrest and actually bit a member of the service. And the member of the service happened to be a deputy chief. You see him in the background. And, the reason I don't want to even emphasize that he was a deputy chief is because it's irrelevant to me. He's a New York City police officer. No matter what the rank, he was assaulted. And to me, that's the end all be all. The person goes to jail and has to be prosecuted. But the problem is she was charged with second-degree assault. And it got drawn out, and you really didn't hear much of it again. It was in the news when it first happened. But her being a council member, I think, absolutely influenced the outcome of the case. You want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at this. This is a council member, right? Somebody that represents the city. And you're talking about whether it's a deputy chief or a police officer, an NYPD uniform member to service gets bit by the city councilor. I mean, I don't understand how the criminal justice system can look away from that and say that was an outrageous act. We, in demonstrations all the time, would get city council members, even mayors, right? Mayors would sit down and get allegedly arrested, and you would cuff them and you'd walk them off, and then they'd get a quick summons and be on their way, and they showed their political friends, look, I demonstrate with you and stuff like that, but never an assault like this against a police officer. And this is not, a pushing or anything else. This is a physical biting where somebody now is going to have a wound on the side of their hand. Like an example, Bill de Blasio would go and do demos and get arrested, and it would be a quick thing. But there was no assault. This adds on a whole nother spectrum. And then to make this what I would think is a bargain, but it's definitely signs of favoritism to the city council member who now is the charges are dismissed and gone. And what does that message, what does that message send to everybody else, all the other citizens that do these demos, and to all the cops now that are going to be out there policing these things?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 1000%. And it wasn't just, an inconsequential contact with the teeth that scratched his arm. It was a bite. There were photos of a bite mark on the arm of this deputy chief, and that's an injury. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no harassment. There's no issue. That's an assault too. He's taking police action. She's resisting arrest. She's interfering with governmental administration. She intentionally bit this police officer. So I'm not a fan. And Land of Make Believe is asking, why were the charges dropped? The case was dismissed because of restorative justice, under a restorative justice program. The Brooklyn District Attorney, Eric Gonzalez, I guess brokered this deal. And the complainant, who's the deputy chief, had to agree with it. So it's not like they didn't just drop the charges. They didn't use prosecutorial discretion to drop the case, which they do time and time again when it involves the NYPD, right? But here it says, the case was resolved through a restorative justice process that created space for dialogue, accountability, and healing, a spokesman for Gonzalez said in the statement. It was based on the wishes of the victim and the defendant's willingness to make amends. This is exactly what restorative justice is meant to do: address harm, foster understanding, and support a path forward. There are no consequences here for the Congresswoman. Listen, we are supposed to be held to a higher standard, right, as public servants. The NYPD, the 50A is there forever. Eric Dim will forever in his life be the most complained cop because of 50A, no matter what he wants to do for the rest of his life. No matter what he's going through in his life, he will be the most complained cop because we are NYPD and we are held to a higher standard, which we should be. Why is not a sitting city council member being held to a higher standard? Now, the city council says that the ethics committee is taking a case and looking at it. Yeah, I'm holding my breath to see the outcome of that. Let me hold my breath and see the outcome of this ethics complaint against this Democratic city council member, even though she's on the Common Sense Caucus and wants to work with the police.
And you know what? We're not going to see the results of that ethics report, right? And neither are the citizens and all the other cops. So the damage, in my opinion, is done right now. Just by that dismissal, just by that unconditional discharge, that the damage is done. And you know what? She's been one of the conditions of that arrest should have been that she had to get off the council, because that's not how council members work, right? But yeah, it's just appalling. It really is, And I listen. I mean, the deputy chief that made the agreement, I don't know. Was there political pressure? Even SpongeBob says boo. Was there political pressure there? I don't know. I'm sure somebody from up top might have said, "Hey, go along with this and help us out here or whatever. But it just is looks of serious improprieties. It's bad.
And I'll tell you the truth, as an executive, I would have had to dig my heels in, and I think that's part of something we're going to talk about later. Is making tough decisions. It's part of integrity to make the tough decisions, and you have to push back your bosses sometimes. I'm sorry, I got assaulted by a sitting city council member. I'm not going to me personally, and I'm not criticizing Frank personally, but my personal take is I couldn't do it. Because to me, I'm setting an example that it's okay because now there's no consequences. I personally would have taken that situation and used it as an example for my members that, listen, we're going to push this to the end of the earth. And you know what? If the fact that I'm a higher ranking member of the service, helps me in that, so be it. But I'm sorry. I just don't agree with the outcome of this case, and I don't know what the reasoning behind it is. I know the chief; he's a good guy, and I don't agree with it. I'm sorry.
Imagine being a cop that got bit, and your boss, your CO, is telling you got to take this one on the chin and go meet with this person. We're going to dismiss it. You would never do that. That's not that's not a good boss, right? That's not a good leader. So, and like Eric said, this guy has a tattoo of somebody's bite mark on their arm for the rest of their life, right? I mean, and with no repercussions at all. I mean, it's just crazy. It's sickening. It really is.
Yeah, I find it hard enough, when the officers were dealing with CCRB and they were offered to have sit downs
Right. Yeah.
with the complainant, and then the case would be resolved. It's still on your record, but it's resolved, right?
Yeah, mediated or something.
Mediated, right? Mediation, right? You're offered mediation, and if you accept mediation, even if they don't show up, it still gets closed out to mediation. But I find that hard to swallow, but I understand why an officer might do that because they're trying to save their record, so to speak. And I don't even know why I brought it up because I don't think there's really a correlation. I understand why a cop would do that because they're trying to save their 50A, their record, their future of having because it's also they're going up against an unfair fight by going up against the CCRB. You're not getting a fair fight in CCRB, as we know, time and time again. So, maybe taking that mediation, even though you did nothing wrong, I can understand it. But letting someone who bit you while you're taking police action, a sitting city council member, I don't. This doesn't sit right with me.
No. What's next? A police officer gets shot in the leg, and they say, "Hey, take it on the chin." You only got shot in the leg. You'll be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna get the combat frost. Come on.
Yeah.
No, I totally don't agree with that.
And I agree with you.
Hey, listen, this morning, John and Eric on the Finest Unfiltered had a really good show. It was a lively conversation with retired detective Mike Furia, who's been a contributor to the Finest Unfiltered family. He's contributed on our show, and I know he's always contributing on John and Eric's show in the comments. Yep. And he came on today and did an interview and went over his career, and he did a really good job. Like I said, it was a lively conversation. He's an animated fella, but he had a really good career, and he's had some struggles through his career, some differences with supervisors, and he explained some situations in his career where his supervisors might have done some questionable things, and that's part of the problem nowadays with supervisors. And I think absolutely take a look, go back. The link is in the Finest Unfiltered library, if you will. When you go on the YouTube channel or on X, you can go to the at Finest Unfiltered and scroll through it and find the episode and watch the episode. It's a good watch. It's a good watch today.
I give Mike a lot of credit because he was blatantly honest, right? He spoke right from the heart. Really, when you listen to him, he's speaking from the heart. And what was sad about Mike's story is he really cared about the job. And he was so adamant and cared about the work that he did, so proud of the work he did. Yeah, a department, they didn't care. Their concerns weren't what you did. It's what you're doing for me now, not what you can do for me later. They kind of threw him to wolves. But I think, like Tom Joyce had mentioned, even though they had the adversity, he still made his way, right? He still made his way into detective, and he still made his way up. So he is. I give him a lot of credit, a lot of strength that he continued on. Right? He didn't. He may have been beat down by some of the bosses, and some of them guys were disrespectful and stole his stuff, but he carried on. And like you just said, if you haven't seen that, go back and watch what the interview with John and Eric from this morning. It was phenomenal. He did a great job.
Yeah, he walks himself. He walks through the career. That's how they do their interviews when they interview retired members. I did it. You did it. We sat down. We went through our careers, and he talked about how he started out as a cop, moved up pretty quick to anti-crime, and then up into the squad. From the squad, he moved over to the real-time crime center, and then wound up being an expert in the facial recognition unit, and which is like an unsung hero, really, for the detective squad, where he's doing a lot of work to give leads to the detectives that are doing the cases, and they go unrecognized at sometimes. And another thing we're going to talk about today is making sure that we recognize the good work and the hard work of the men and women that work for you, and that's one of the responsibilities that you have. So with that being said, like I said in the opening, thankfully Rob's feeling better. But originally Rob was scheduled not to be on the show, and we had retired Deputy Inspector Anthony Raganella, who some you have seen on our show before. We brought him on as a content expert when we talked about disorder control in the city, and he is the CEO of New York Blue Line Consulting, and he's also, which really adds to today's show and to help us out with today's show, being a content expert, he's the co-founder of Rising Star Promotions, which is a promotional school for NYPD supervisory promotional exams. So let's bring up to the stage retired Deputy Inspector Tony Raganella. Good afternoon,
Tony. Welcome back, Tony.
What's up, men? How are my esteemed colleagues doing today?
Thanks for almost filling in completely for me, but I really appreciate you stepping up, Tony. I was down and out, and Ron carried me last Wednesday, and Tony was going to carry me this Wednesday. But I really appreciate both of you guys. So thank you so much.
Well, Rob, I got to tell you, for two very important reasons, I'm very thankful that you're better. Number one, I like you, so I don't want to see anything bad happen to you. And number two, if you didn't come on today, I was going to be stuck with Big Ron by myself, and that's a fate worse than death.
Wow.
I love you, big guy. Don't worry about it. I love you.
Retired Deputy Inspector Anthony Raganella, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on a future episode, possibly. Jack, get him out of here. No, seriously. There you go. Bye-bye.
Hey, what happened?
But seriously, thanks for coming on today. We appreciate it, and we know you're going to be have some valuable input into today's conversation. Like I said, I believe the hardest transition on this job through any rank would be from police officer to sergeant. What are your guys' take on that statement?
Tony,
I'll tell you, for me personally, going from all the way from police officer up to deputy inspector, the two hardest transitions that I had for sure, and I'm sure you guys agree with me on this, was going from police officer to sergeant, right? That's that first line supervisor, and then going from lieutenant to captain, because now you're in the executive ranks, and that's a whole nother transition, which is a topic for a different day. But yes, definitely going from police officer to sergeant is a huge transition that that you have to get accustomed to and find your groove and figure out your way and muddle through it to be able to get through it for sure.
I think at one time, right, as a police officer, you see another sergeant, you see a sergeant, right? Maybe a squad sergeant, maybe another sergeant up in the squad. And you're like, wow, that guy's good, man. You know, he took care of me. Or it could be the opposite. It could be like, hey, my sergeant sucks, man. He's stupid. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he gives stupid directions, and he doesn't even know the patrol guy. I don't even know how he passed the exam. So eventually, somewhere in your mind, you say, hey, I'm gonna study for that test, right? And maybe it could be monetary, it could be a lot of reasons, but you've made that decision, and that, in my opinion, is the hard decision, because you're literally going from a cop who's responsible for himself. Now you're going to become a sergeant responsible for a whole bunch of cops. So absolutely, unequivocally, the hardest transition, right? You have no, most of us don't have a lot of experience as supervisors, and now you're going to be a supervisor. So it's a whole nother thing. You may have just learned how to become a cop, and now you're going to become a sergeant, and you're going to have to tell cops what to do and lead them. So yeah, that's definitely the most hardest transition right there.
Yeah, and you touch on something that I spoke about in the past, and Rob Nappy brings it up in the comments too. He says, I was motivated to study for sergeant because of some terrific sergeants I worked under, and also a few real boobs who were useless. And that is the absolute truth. And it was the same for me. And I did a lot of studying. I put a lot of time into it. You know, people know, and we'll get into it a little bit more, how much you have to actually put into it to become a sergeant. It's not something that's easy. It's a civil service exam. And it's not easy. It encompasses the entire patrol guide, some of the administrative guide, and the penal law. And so there's a lot to study. So you really have to dedicate a good portion of a half a year to study to do well and excel on it on the test. And so,
hey, Ron,
I used to say this all the time. Like, I'd have a sergeant that would do something that would just like piss me off, or just, you look at them like Rob Nappy says, is a boob. And I go, oh, that's another hour. I'm going to study for an extra hour today, because that guy just can't be my boss forever. You know, go ahead, Tom.
the one, you talk about the civil service exam to move from the transition from police officer to sergeant, but even the transition from sergeant to lieutenant and lieutenant to captain, those civil service exams, the one thing that it doesn't take into account and encompass is your leadership ability, right? So, and we all say this all the time. You had a lucky Saturday, right? It's like, you have these bosses that are out there that couldn't find their way out of a paper bag, and what kind of leadership quality did I have? But we give these civil service exams, and there's no quantitative or qualitative analysis that we do on these exams for promotion to be able to judge or qualify what leadership capabilities you're going to have once you get promoted. And the job fails us right from the outset about not doing any leadership development. And I'm sure during the course of this podcast we'll talk more about that, but it's a problem.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that to a point. I think the civil service exam to become a supervisor is the only fair way to do it. I think they got away from the interviews of the past because they're so subjective in the scoring. So this civil service exam is the way to go. I think that there's been issues in the past, like when I took the sergeant's exam, right? And it was the top 1,750 plus ties that would make the list. So you had over 1,800 people that would make the test. But it wasn't a pass-fail. It wasn't like you made 70 and you passed. It would be, how far down the list do we have to go of the thousands of people that would take the exam to get 1,750? And for my exam, it was 81. You had to have an 81 or better to pass the sergeant's test. Now, because they kept that model up until one test they had to go down to like 51. So there were sergeants that got promoted that had a 51 on the exam, because once DCAS puts out the notice of exam that was just up on the board, they're bound by law that's how they have to promote off of it. And so there were people that actually got promoted to sergeant with 50s and in the 50s and 60s. So their base knowledge was lacking, let alone we'll get into the leadership and the lack of leadership training that I think we all agree that the job has.
I
Yeah,
just the some of the other agencies, when they have sergeant's exams, they often put leadership books in their necessary reading material that they can be tested on. And I know that there's been some PMI projects, that's the Police Management Institute projects within the department. All of us are PMI alumni, that they actually did studies that some of those books of leadership and things like that should be in the promotional exams. But the city never went to that. And I don't understand that, because, and I'll personally go back as far as this, that those leadership courses should be taught in the police academy, because keeping the officers together, unity, working as a team, team building, moving forward, those are all things that we should do. And I know that the department will be like, oh, it's corruption, guys get too close and they work together, it's corruption. But if you don't build a leader from the beginning, it's hard to build them up later on. We all get into our certain complacencies and we do the same thing all the time. And then to break out of that, it's a little tough. So that leadership should definitely be taught in the police academy. And I firmly believe that there's really good leadership books, whether it's, some books from the Marine Corps, military books, all of those things you need to build on that and have those books available and make them part of the actual, test. I mean, this graphic is a prime example, right? A boss, you want a boss drives, depends on authority, inspires fear, says I did this and I did that, places the blame. He knows how it's done. He uses people, and Mike Furr from this morning could tell you exactly about that. Takes credit, but a good leader, they coach, right? They push forward. They work on goodwill. They always say we. They fix things that are broken, and they show how it's done. They don't make people do it, and they develop people, right? That was one of the big things we talked about earlier today. How do we develop people? You got to push people forward. And a big thing right there is give credit. Don't take the credit. You got to give the credit. That's what makes people move. And that's what, when we say we can't promote everybody, which we can't, right? We can't make everybody a detective. We can't move everybody up. But that positive reinforcement, that promoting people, getting them to where they are and understanding. Like I guarantee if Mike from this morning, if he was told that he did a good job and he was shown that, hey, we really appreciate you, what you do, as a good leader should have done, I bet you he would have stayed longer.
Hey, I see in the comments, Rob Nappy brought up Colin Powell.
Yeah.
I read every one of Colin Powell's books. I thought phenomenal teaching in those books about being a leader. And I know you guys have a very old picture of me from 1984. For those of you that don't know, I was subjected to leadership at a very early age. At the age of 14, I went to LaSalle Military Academy. So I was indoctrinated into the whole concept. Look at that handsome young man there. I was indoctrinated into the world of leadership development at a very early age. And I will tell you, one of the most important things about developing leadership is that it never, ever ends. The minute that you say, I'm a good leader, I don't have to get any better, it's the same as a pro athlete. You're done. You're destined to be average at that point. You have to constantly work and improve yourself, and it never ever ends. And unfortunately, when I go around speaking at conferences and I speak to different police departments and police chiefs and whatnot, one of the things that I always bring up about leadership, I use the analogy that, I asked for a show of hands in the audience as to who has service in the armed forces and who's from the military, right? And inevitably, anybody that raises their hand that was in the armed forces, they will tell you that in some form or fashion, from the minute they walked into that role as a flat out private or whatever rank they started as, they were receiving leadership development from the get-go, right? Why aren't we doing that in the police academy, right? We're a paramilitary organization, and then you wonder why when we move up the ranks and we become sergeants, lieutenants, captains, chiefs, we've never had any formal courses on leadership development, and we just have to I guess the policy is you just throw up your hands and say, "Oh, you'll figure it out." Well, that's not the right way to do it, right? So when I had the luxury of being able to speak to the recruits during training when they would come through the disorder control unit, I would take the time to spend a little bit of time to speak to them about this, and I would tell them, "Listen, in the absence of the fact that the department doesn't provide you with any leadership development, one of the things that I always suggested to them to do is, number one, read books, right? Like Colin Powell's books, whatever. If you have any aspirations of becoming a leader on the job or moving up the ranks, and that's not to say that as a cop, you're not a leader, because you are, right? The rank doesn't have anything to do with leadership. But the other thing that I tell them to do as they grow on the job, look at all the bosses that you work with and that you work for, right? And you'll see when we all of us can say, I could throw out a bunch of names right now of bosses that I thought were absolutely horrible, and I would shudder at the thought of them showing up on one of my jobs as a cop, because I didn't want them there, because they were just going to make things worse. And then on the flip side of that, you had bosses that you would literally walk on water for if you could, and you would go to the ends of the earth for them because you knew that they had your back and everything was going to be all right if they showed up on the scene. So I would tell the recruits, listen, as you grow up on a job, look at all these different bosses that you're going to come into contact with. And if a boss makes you feel bad for some reason, or makes you feel uneasy, or doesn't do something right, put that in the back of your mind and say, when I become a boss, I'm not going to do that. That's not one of the qualities that I want when I become a boss. And then look at the bosses that really do a good job at boost the morale of the unit and inspire you to do better and be motivated, and say to yourself, that's the style that I want, and incorporate that. So when you look at all these different bosses that you interact with on in your career, you draw from all of that and you try to develop your own leadership style. And that's unfortunately what we have to do in the meantime, because we don't have leadership development on the job.
And how many times have you seen cops lead better than the sergeant?
We're gonna actually show a little of that in a little bit. We're actually gonna show a little of that in a little bit, and it's a little scary, because I'll give you a little preview. We're not gonna bring up a video right now, but getting ready for this show, we looked long and hard to try and find some good videos of supervisors leading in the field, and we had a very hard time to come up with what we're going to have today. But there was video after video after video showing what we believe is poor leadership, and we're gonna talk about that. And I see Eric's in the comments today. His fingers are going good, nice and strong. We love you, brother. But hashtag EDM, right? Eric Dim Marine. He talks about it on his show all the time. When he was in the Marine Corps, he was taught from day one in the Marine Corps all the way through when he went to officer candidate school, that you are taught, no matter what your rank is, you are taught that in the heat of battle, you may have to take over for the next rank. So you are trained for that next position, even though you're at the lower level. And the military has a lot of good training, and we know that. And you took away my thunder by throwing that picture up yourself, Tony. I'll get you for that. I was saving that for later.
Real quick, what Samara Cohen says. I love what she said. Jack had put up a little while ago. Would you want a squad of yourself? That is a great line. That's a great analogy. I mean, would you? be
Yep.
proud of the work that you do, and then would you want all of you working for you, right? That's a great line.
And I'll add to what Sarah said, like another to dovetail off of that. I was told by one of my mentors growing up on the job that when you think about the frontline supervisor and lieutenant out on patrol, like how do you lead, and what kinds of things should you do, right? The fallback is, for me, what I was always taught was basically supervise the way that you would want to be supervised, right?
Mhm.
And if you're doing something, if you're a boss and you're treating one of your subordinates in a way or doing something that you wouldn't want done to you, then maybe that's not the right way to go at it, right? And that's a good litmus test to use.
Yeah, and the difference between being a boss and being a leader are vast, right? You're a boss by virtue of passing that exam that we talked about. You pass that test, your list number comes up, you get promoted, you are a boss and have the authority of a boss. That does not make you a leader, right? What's the difference between a boss and a leader? There was a graphic that was put up before listing a litany of things of how difference of the way a boss handles a situation versus the way a leader handles a situation. But I think the main difference between the boss and the leader is the boss is in a place of authority by virtue of their rank, whereas a leader has earned your respect. Like Tony says, they're willing to go through a fire for you, through a wall for you, and follow you. So you as a leader have the ability to influence a positive outcome. And that's the big difference. And there's a lot of things that come with that. So
I just jump around real quick. Just G2 training, right? Two guys I know, Mike Marino and Jimmy Cohn.
I know both.
And they were two great men, and they were two great leaders. Mike Marino was the type of guy that if he asked you to go through the wall, like you just said, let me know when you're ready me to go, Chief. I'm going through. And Jimmy Cohn, the expertise and understanding that he had for the aviation unit, plus his military experience, made him also a phenomenal leader. Changed the dynamics of the aviation unit and really brought it up to speed with medevacs, high-rise rescues, the Bambi bucket, everything, brought everything up to really be, there he is, a strong leader, the capability to not be afraid to make changes and implement those changes. And he worked diligently with ESU, with insertions and everything else. Two really good bosses. That was a good comment right there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're hitting on it. We're talking about the transition from police officer, right? So what are the differences also, besides the leadership aspect of it, is responsibility, right? When you're a cop, you're responsible for yourself and your partner pretty much. Pretty much you're responsible for that radio car. You're sitting in the car, you're responsible for my actions and my partner's actions, my safety, my partner's safety. And then when you get onto scenes with other cops or whatever the case may be, you're looking out for one another. But really, you're responsible for yourself. Once you become a supervisor, once you become a sergeant, it now expands, because now you're not just responsible for yourself and your radio car partner. You're responsible for an entire squad that you're going to oversee directly. You're responsible for a platoon when you're out on patrol. So even if they're not in your squad, you're still responsible for those individuals and their actions and how they're going to work and respond, and making sure that they are responding to jobs and whatnot and handling the jobs properly. When you're on the desk, you're responsible as a sergeant for all the operations in the command and everything that's going on administratively in the command, as well as prisoners, right? The 3 Ps that get you in trouble: prisoners, property, and something else. Yeah, something else. But those are, your responsibilities grows exponentially, right? And like you said, Tony, also, we are gonna have another show on this. Once you get to the executive level, it it explodes your responsibility. But going from cop to sergeant, your responsibilities are so vast compared to what they were a week before. And then you go into BMOC, and I believe BMOC is like 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yep.
Something like that. And a lot of it is fluff.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot of fluff. Cover your ass stuff.
That's it.
Job puts
The whole
out,
thing.
you know.
The whole 3 weeks is fluff.
You know, they do mock desk. You're a desk officer as a mod. You know, you do a couple of scenarios. You have a ton of speakers come in. You get your mandatory IAB training. You get your mandatory EEO training, and all this other stuff. But where is the leadership training? You know, you might have a seasoned captain or inspector come in and talk to you about the expectations, and that might be one of the most interesting things, depending on who the speaker is. I've known a few of the speakers myself that have gone and spoke to BMOC classes, and some of them are very, very well versed and tell you like it is and explain it to you. But it is more than just the leadership. It's the responsibility that you have to be able to put on your shoulders at the time, right? So talking about the different and talking about we've had some lousy bosses. We've all discussed it. Our members in the comments are talking about it. You've had some really bad bosses. You've had lazy bosses. The one comment was, you know, some people want to become a boss, they don't have to do police work anymore. Oh my God, if that's your motivation, you know. And I'll go back. Let me take a step back here, Tony. From your experience, you know, from Rising Star Promotions, I'll give a plug to your company, right? Rising Star Promotions. What do you hear from your students that are studying for sergeant as what their top motivation is? Because we know it's not money, because right now they're actually making less than cops in some instances.
Believe it or not, the top motivation that I hear is that they can't stand working for the boss that they have, and they know they can do a better job than the boss they have. So what does that tell you about what kind of leaders we're developing, right? We're doing nothing to develop any leaders when your major motivation for getting promoted is because I can't stand the guy that I work for, and I know I could do a better job than he or she could. That's horrible. That says so much about what this job is doing, or I should say what this job is not doing to provide leadership development. You know, it's horrible. And you know, I'll tell you, when we talk about leadership, right? And Ron, this is the part that you're wondering about, because I sent you something, a quote, and you didn't know whether to make heads or tails of it. This is where I'll bring it in for you.
Thanks for calling me speaking on my own podcast.
No, don't worry about it. I got more of that where it came from. You know, when we talk about leadership, right? If I was to go around and ask 100 people, what's the definition of leadership? What does leadership mean to you? You'll get 100 different answers, because there is no dictionary definition of what leadership is. It's a million different things to a million different people, right? So when I try to quantify, or you know, and give a definition that makes sense in my own mind, and explain to people what leadership is, I use that quote that I sent you, which is from Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart. And if we can bring that quote up, it was from a Supreme Court case that was decided back in 1964. And the decision went like this. It said, "I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that shorthand description. And perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it." That court case was when they had to decide what the definition of obscenity was, from 1964. And the reason I bring that up now is because with all the hundreds of definitions that we possibly have for what leadership is, the only way that I could really describe it is to say, I know it when I see it. I know a good boss when I have one. I know what it looks like to be led by a good boss out on the street. I can't quantify it in words or tell you how to do it. I just know it when I see it. And
Yeah.
it's important that we recognize it and stay away from the bad traits and gravitate towards the good stuff that we need to do when we're out there on the street as a frontline supervisor. There's a lot that goes into it that we're just missing the ball on and not teaching, you know.
The problem is, Tony, is the leaders that you met and saw and observed, they all made themselves leaders, right? It was nothing that the department did. And it was either done by their observations or, self-learning, everything else. Because if we go back to BMOC, 3 weeks, right, I think I had it down on J Street. It was terrible 3 weeks. In my class, we got promoted first. So we were already sergeants. So you can only imagine the attention span that we have for people showing us these, booklets of, how to do this and how to do that. It's like, dude, we just studied for the test and passed. Okay. So all the crap that you're showing me, I already looked through that. I mean, the only exciting time was when it was kind of like a unreal thing. All of a sudden, these guys come in with suits, like mafia-looking guys. All the shades go down, and they shut the doors. They kick the instructors out and said, "We're from the SBA." It was Joe Toll and his leadership, and they were going to tell us how you could get screwed this way, you could get screwed that way, and we're going to protect you. And then that was the only time you really paid attention. But as far as a leadership training, it's all done on your own, right? The job doesn't give two rats' asses about leadership. They just want to put 3 stripes on your arms and push you out the door and say, "Guess what, guy? You're responsible now." That's it.
And the problem is that it festers and it makes it worse, because if you're not a good leader as a sergeant,
yeah,
where are you going to be at when you become a lieutenant? Now you have further authority. And then you take another test and you pass and you become a captain. And now you're executive and you have no leadership skills or abilities as a captain. And now you're, like I said, now you're in charge of, it could be hundreds of people.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like that snowball. You're going up in rank, but you're going down that hill faster and faster and faster. And it's just really bad. So we've been talking a lot about leadership and being a boss. When you say be the boss, there's times when you have to be that boss and you have to bark, right? And you have to take control of a situation, and the mentorship has to be put on hold. And now I got to be the boss, and I got to give stern direction, because it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of public safety. It's a matter of officer safety. It's a matter of taking control of a chaotic scene. And you have to have that ability. And you have to have the cops to respect you, so that when those situations come up, they're actually going to listen. But what I've seen, unfortunately, in the most recent past, is that the sergeants aren't taking control. And that's a big problem. So we're going to go through a couple of videos, and then after each, we'll discuss it and give our take on it. So the first one I'd like to bring up would be it's a video from the Dominican parade in Manhattan. And I don't know if alcohol was involved, whatever the case may be. The crowd starts to get a little out of control, and there's a whole bunch of cops on the corner. And then it comes to a point where it's time to take action. So let's take a look.
No, listen, officer.
A chaotic scene turned physical on Sunday at the Dominican Day Parade for Arnardo Vargas Jr. You can see in this video the 25-year-old repeatedly punched on all sides of him by a handful of NYPD officers.
So right there, you have a bunch of officers there, and one cop grabs a guy and starts punching the guy. Now, I don't have the backstory, I don't know what precipitated them having to take action against that person. I didn't see that person violently resisting. But what I do see is the sergeant joining in the fray, and then another cop standing back, and then another sergeant, a second sergeant coming in. And so now I have two sergeants and an officer. I have punches being thrown, and I'm not going to discuss whether they were justified or not because I don't have the backstory. I don't know if this person did something violent prior to. But you have the two sergeants now with the one cop, and you have the other cop, and if you keep the video going, there's a whole bunch of more cops. What's your take, Rob?
I think it's atrocious. The sergeant there has enough personnel on the scene to direct. He has to lead by example, right? He has to enforce the policies and the procedures. So he has to be able to stand back and direct those activities, okay? He also is responsible for the whole scene. So when he puts those blinders on and goes after the guy and grabs him, what's going on around him? How is he protecting everybody else, right? He's not. He's concentrating on his own thing. The sergeants, they need to step back, let the cops, if you want cops to be cops, let them do the work. Now, guys will say, "Oh, he leads by example." Well, in my opinion, that's not a really good example. All right, a good example would be like, Ron, you go grab that guy. Tony, go over there. Make sure nobody comes from our right flank, left flank. Rob, look at our six. Make sure nobody's coming from behind us. Protect yourselves. Protect your men. All right, but to get physically involved, I mean that's not necessary. Hey, if it's you and your driver, I get it. That may be a time, but any other time, the sergeant, frontline supervisor, is to do that. Supervise, right? But Tony, I mean, what do you think? You think that that the sergeant's got to, it doesn't need to. If he doesn't need to engage, don't engage.
100%. And this goes back to what we talked about on the other podcast when we're at protests and stuff. I don't. Somebody has to maintain the big picture and supervise what's going on. If everybody's in the fray, nobody's watching the bigger picture of what's going on. And your job as a frontline supervisor is to coordinate the activities of what's going on in front of you with the cops and make sure that everything's going right. And we need those bosses, that frontline supervisors. When the sergeant shows up on the scene of something, he needs to take immediate control, assess the situation, find out what's going on. And this all happens, I get it. Sometimes it's chaotic situations, but inherently the cops on the street want and need to be led. And somebody has to step up on the scene, which is the sergeant's role, and take control of the situation. And you all can identify with the fact, because we've all had a boss that, like I talked about before, that you knew when he showed up on the scene, things were not going to go right. And one of the major things that I always had a problem with when I was a cop on patrol, if I had a boss that showed up on the scene and wasn't decisive and couldn't make decisions, then what did I call you here for? Like, I don't. And when you look at the patrol procedures nowadays, almost every single procedure, one of the first is request the patrol supervisor to respond.
Yeah, we're having a little technical difficulties with Tony's internet. We appreciate him joining us. He's actually out. He was speaking at a conference today, so we'll try and get him back up. You back up?
You got me back?
Yeah, you're good now.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So one of the things is when you look at the patrol guide procedures that we have in place nowadays, everything is request the patrol supervisor to respond.
Yeah.
So a boss is always showing up, but you got to take control of the situation and you have to be decisive and make decisions. I don't need a boss to show up and say, I don't know what to do. Well, then what did I call you here for? We need bosses that are going to make decisions and take control and step out in front and guide us on what needs to be done. And that's just not that's not the case a lot of times, unfortunately.
Also, you want your boss to have your back. That's one of the things we talk about, right? Supporting your subordinates and ensuring that they know that you're going to support them. But when you support them when they're right. But it's also your job as a supervisor, as a leader, to protect your cops, sometimes from themselves. Right? Now, again, I don't know the whole situation, but I didn't see that perp fighting back. And he was taking some blows, and then the sergeant went in and he was adding to the blows instead of maybe tapping that guy out. I would have more respect for that sergeant if he would have tapped that guy out and took control of that guy until somebody else came over, because maybe that guy got hooked. I don't know the situation, but there are. Let's take that situation specific out. We've all seen it time and time again where a guy gets hooked and it becomes personal when it should never be personal. It's got to always be about business, right? And taking care of business. You can't make it personal. So if you don't sometimes you don't step in to save the cop from himself, you're not being a leader, right? And that's what I see in that particular video. And and again, a leader could be another cop. We talk about this all the time. And we always have to watch out for one another. And that's one of the things we talk about. Listen, if you see somebody getting hooked, tap them out. Tap them out, let them step back. But like you said, again, the boss has to be able to see the big picture and take appropriate actions.
Can we bring up because of what Perf did that, and that's the Police Executive Research Forum. They did this, the critical decision-making model, right? And if we could bring that model up, you'll see that model, it can't have the sergeant engaged, right? Because the first part of that model is you got to collect the information, and then you got to assess it, and then you consider police powers, and then identify options, the best course of action, act, review, and reassess. And all within that time, you're thinking about ethics, values, the sanctity of a human life. So if you're engaged, it's very hard to do that. Now, I think the police academy has adopted this. I believe it was also Nassau County was using it for the longest time. But if you take that sergeant right there, he can't make those quick assessments. He can't collect all that information. And I know, Ron, we have more videos that are going to exemplify that. And that's the only reason why I wanted to bring up that decision-making model right there, because, Perf does this, search throughout the country. They get the, best police practices and they put it out. And this is a pretty good model. And if you're going to be a sergeant, just take a look at it. Even as a cop, take a look at it, because you can use this model for every job that you go to, and it'll get you thinking about things and getting you in that format of making those critical decisions. So I just wanted to throw that in, Ron. I'm sorry to interrupt you, because I just wanted to throw it in, because I think the next videos, if we look at that and utilize that model in those videos, you'll see that all of those steps, and it has to be done quickly, right? It's not something but it's a constant rotation. So once you've done that complete assessment, you go back and you start to reassess again. So it's a work in progress, and I think it's a really good model.
Yeah, and I see that retired Detective Mike Furia is in the comments today. Mike, I don't know if you were here for the beginning of the show. We were talking about your interview today. Great job today on the Finest Unfiltered with John and Eric. It was great to listen to your story. It was enjoyable. It was an enjoyable watch, and we encourage everybody to go back and watch the show. But Mike says that a great leader makes a cop's job easier. From what I've seen, being a great leader it's either in you or it's not. And I'll go back to Eric Dim's comment a little earlier, where he says, and he said this many times before, some leaders are born, but a true leader is made through training. And I think that's what we're saying here, is that you can train and receive training to be a proper leader. And it has to start at the very beginning, from the police academy, just like in the military, as we discussed. In the military, it starts from basic training. When they start training you in basic training, they're training you to take over a scene and take control if your leader goes down, right? And we don't have that in the NYPD. So to his point, for the most part, unfortunately, it's a true statement. The good leaders that you do have and you do see out there pretty much have it in them from either prior life experience, their upbringing, whether they went to the LaSalle Military Academy and had it indoctrinated into them when they were 14 years old. Bring that picture up again. And, you know, it's in you. So, yeah, we're going to look at a couple more videos. We're going to look at more videos that we're going to critique, and then we're going to try to show the flip side of the coin.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
Before we get into the other videos, I'll just comment on what we're talking about right now. I think, from my perspective, I think it's a combination of both. I think there's inherent qualities of character and personality that you have as a person, irrespective of the job or the role that you do, that help you in a leadership role. And then the other side to that, which is the combination of it, is that, yes, there are certain leadership skills and development that can be taught to somebody. So I kind of think it's a blend of both. I mean, if you may have certain personality traits and characteristics that detract from, no matter how much I teach you about leadership, you're just going to be an ass clown at it, and it's just never going to come out right. Right. And so there's certain things that are in you that may detract from it, and then there's other things that may help you with it. But it's certainly it's a blend of things that you're born with and things that can be taught to you also.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump over to the comments for a second. Mikey G63 is talking about when he got promoted and he went over to the 6-7. The other sergeants didn't do jack for him, and I'm paraphrasing. And it was his platoon commander, who happened to be Jeff Madry, who helped him out a lot. And I think that is problematic nowadays because you don't have that mentorship. And I'll go back to Mike Furia's interview today, Mike Smith's interview with John and Eric in the past, and the fact that we are losing through attrition for many, many reasons, the wealth of experience and knowledge that we had in this job, and the mentorship is not there at all ranks. And Marlon B from the Finest Unfiltered family is saying that the job as it is by design doesn't want leaders making autonomous decisions and taking charge and sticking their necks out. Now, again, that's going to go back to where I say where the job started to turn, and we're all have some time on the job, where when I was a cop, right, we made decisions. We went out there and we made decisions. We took care of the scene. We did what we were going to do. You didn't have a supervisor up your butt. The supervisor wasn't called to every job. You went and you made a decision. And I think once we went into the impact era, you took away from that autonomousness that Marlon is talking about, because then it was basically go out there, it's team-led enforcement, and cops weren't allowed to independently think and act. Where I disagree is where Marlon is saying that, you know, what does the patrol guide say, right? And that they don't want them sticking their necks out and making decisions. I'm going to disagree and say that that's where it may be true that's how I'm getting feedback from somebody. That's where possibly the job is going south, is because you don't have people that are willing to make these decisions. Remember, Rob, you teach the classes, right? You've been teaching these classes. What is the patrol guide? It's a guide. What I was taught when I was coming up through the ranks is the patrol guide is a guide. If the patrol guide does not say you cannot do it, and the law doesn't say it is illegal, then you can do it. And the law and the guide doesn't say in a lot of places you cannot. It says may, it says should, right? You always have those catchphrases that you're supposed to circle, underline, and highlight, right? When you're doing the studying, right? Circle, underline, and highlight. All those key
100%.
words, right?
Yep.
The guide very rarely forbids you from doing something. Unfortunately, in today's anti-police atmosphere, you are held under such a microscope that people, I'm going to bring up Eric's phrase of the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? people that don't know the most about a situation speak the most about it, right? And they're talking, they're Monday morning quarterbacking. I'll go to body worn cameras and how it takes the human element out of it because you're watching a view from a camera. You don't have the human element, the human fear factor, and other things. And you're sitting there and you're able to go frame by frame by frame to review someone's actions. So that's put fear in people's day-to-day interactions and makes them afraid almost to do their job properly.
Hey,
And that
Ron,
includes supervisors.
I see in the comment that's up right now, class 8311 is talking about that he doesn't remember ever calling for a boss. If the job was heavy, the boss would respond on their own. I will tell you, and I know I've seen in the comments some of my good cops from when I was a lieutenant in Bed-Stuy are here on the are in the comments and watching the podcast, and they'll tell you I was as a patrol lieutenant and a sergeant, I would tell my cops, listen, go out there and be a cop, make decisions on your own. If you make a mistake or do something wrong and it's a mistake of the heart, I'm gonna back you. I'll take care of you if it's an honest mistake. If it's, if you're out there doing corruption or you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, you're just asking for it. But if you're going to call me as a supervisor to the scene because you genuinely need help or you need something, I'm going to come. I'm going to guide you, but it's going to be done by the book. Like we're not going to sugarcoat things and get ourselves into harm's way. I'm going to protect your job, and if that means that we have to do things by the book, we have to do it. And if that's not what you want, then don't call me to the scene. Make a decision on your own. Be a cop. And we'll get you through it. And if it's an honest mistake, I will back you up 100% and we'll get through it. But we're like I said before, with the patrol guide and everything, we've become a culture in this department of call the boss for everything. Call the boss for everything. And what happens now? It used to be the activity logs. Now it's on the phone with the activity. But cops now are like, oh, I called Sergeant Raganella to the scene. Put him in my activity log, and if anything goes wrong, I had a boss on the scene. It was him, and it's a CYA thing at this point that they're calling the boss to the scene, and that's not how it should be.
or like you said, calling me to the scene to try to shit can your job.
Exactly. Don't call me to shit can it. Shit can it yourself.
You brought up a good point, and Eric actually quotes me quite often about that. There are two types of mistakes. There are the mistakes of the mind, where you knew it was wrong and you intentionally did it anyway, and mistakes of the heart. And that's a big thing that I wanted to talk about too, is people have to understand transitioning from police officer to supervisor is the hardest transition. We've established that. We've talked about that in many ways, right, already so far. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes as a supervisor. You can't be afraid to make those mistakes, right? You have to be able to go out there, take the training that you've had, the knowledge that you've learned from the months and months of studying, the experience that you might have gained. And somebody made a comment before that, you love getting a new sergeant that's never been on patrol and now they're a patrol supervisor. Well, that's going to happen because there's a seat for every ass on this job, and not all of them are on patrol or in an enforcement function. So if they're sitting somewhere in their seat and they're not doing patrol and they study and they pass, they're going to very well may show up in a 6-7 handling a 4 to 12 heavy platoon job and not know what the hell they're doing. But you have to have the confidence that you studied, you got your baseline knowledge of the rules and regulations, and hopefully are learning how to translate that into real life situations and take it. But you have to make decisions. And if you make a decision to the heart, meaning that I made this decision on a good faith effort and good faith basis on the facts that I was aware of at the time, and I thought this was the right thing to do, and you made a mistake, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get hurt. There are going to be times where it's going to be like I don't know how you could have thought that was good, and I'm sorry, but that, there's a bad outcome. But most of the time, it's not going to be that egregious.
Listen, mistakes that result from training failure or the individual's failure, That's nothing, right? That's like retraining or whatever. If it's an act or an omission with malintent, yeah, then it's a problematic. And you look at Jessica Tish says, "Oh, if they don't activate their body worn camera, I'm going to start giving them discipline." No, that's not what you should be doing. Okay, you don't know if that's a result of a training issue, uh, excitement, failure to act. I mean, you gotta make sure that it is an intentional thing. Now, if it's done a couple times, then maybe it is, but it needs to be investigated. You just can't put a blanket statement on it. And then I'll tell you, when I was first a sergeant in the 2-5, and I was working late tours, and the driver was an old timer, and because he didn't have a partner, so he was a sergeant's operator. I came from the 4-1. I like making arrests. I like being active. I like putting my hands on people. I like whatever. So job comes over. I tell him, I said, Frank, let's go. I got to go to that job. Okay. And he would drive like this. I go, Frank, I want to get to the job. Okay, boss. Driving like that. By the time I got there, the job was over. I go, Frank, what the fuck are we? What's wrong with you? He goes, some jobs we have to get there fast, and I'll get there fast for you, Sarge. Other jobs, we're gonna take our time. So even all the timer teaching me, this rookie sergeant. You know what? You're right. You're right, brother.
And that's a great point, Rob. You have to, as a new supervisor, and even as an inspector and a commanding officer of a borough, of a housing borough, I knew that I didn't know everything, and I could learn from everybody and anybody, including a police officer. I wasn't so high and mighty that I couldn't learn, because there's people that know a lot more than me. And like I've said in the past, my success in my career comes from building good teams and surrounding myself with people that are smarter than me. Right? And then you have some shit show supervisors, which we're going to show in a second. Right? But it's important that you need to learn from your mistakes. Right? Somebody just put up, let me just scroll back a little second. Reed put up, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. A quote from Colin Powell, right? Learn from your mistakes. So your good judgment comes from making a bad call, possibly, or be observant and learn from others' mistakes also. You
Even
watch
better.
somebody else make a mistake, watch and say, oh, I'm not doing that.
Even better, even better. And I'll tell you another thing with Colin Powell. Colin Powell will be the first one to tell you, like what you're talking about, is surround yourself with people that are smarter than you are and listen to what they say, right? Because you don't know it all, right? You have to be able to let your ego go and say, just because I have bars up on my shoulder or I got stars and bars doesn't mean that I know everything. There's people at a rank lower than me that are far smarter than I am, and I need to rely on them and listen to what they're saying and have an open mind to what they're saying. And sometimes bosses can't get past that, and that's horrible.
Listen, if you're the smartest one in the room, then you shouldn't be in that room.
That's right.
Exactly.
Leave the room. All right, so let's get into the second video. The second video is it's we're gonna watch it, and I don't know how, we'll talk about it afterwards. It's basically an incident that gets out of control. It gets out of control fast, and it spirals out of control even more at a migrant center, at one of these where they were housing the illegal migrants that were coming in to the city, and they go to take somebody into custody, and it gets out of control really fast. And there's a bunch of cops on the scene, and there's a sergeant on the scene. So let's take a look. I stopped the video for a second, Jack. I'm going to stop it right there for a second, and I'm just going to say, I don't know if you caught it, but there was a uniformed sergeant that was there, took a step back, and walked, if you're looking at the screen, towards your right. And I haven't seen him since. Let's go back to the video. Oh, there he is.
Oh, God, back up. Back up. Oh, my. No. Yo, security, surround the cops. Surround the cops. Watch out. Rebel, let's go.
Silence
think
is deafening for us.
The officer with the glasses in the front, this I think is a male Hispanic officer. He did a better job directing and watching, and he just did a whole better job than the sergeant did. Like that's I don't know, like you said, where'd the sergeant go? So I mean, I like what Land of Make Believe says. You could retreat, you could go outside to a safe location. I mean, but if you're overwhelmed and they're throwing stuff, you don't have to subject yourselves. You know what? You get the guy another day or whatever. But that's not an ESU job, I'll tell you that much. But definitely, if you need to regroup. It's safety first, and that's not a safe environment right there. But there is no real. In my opinion, control right there. There's nobody, like I just said, there's nobody watching. The 360. Nobody's watching to say, "Hey, duck." They were through a water bottle at one point. So I mean, that could injure you. You got to make sure that somebody's watching. So I really like what that police officer did in the front, though. I thought he really stepped up.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, each of you who you thought the leader of that incident was,
I could tell you who it wasn't.
Well, absolutely. But the two leaders that I saw in that video, one was that male Hispanic police officer who took the most command and control of that scene. And the second was wearing a yellow vest and giving instructions. Because I didn't hear that sergeant say one thing, give any direction to any of those cops. There was no command voice to stand back or anything like that, other than somebody with the video camera giving directions to the security to surround the cops for their safety, whoever that was, or camera, or holding the camera, right? That sergeant, because that's what he is by virtue of passing the exam. He is a boss. He has no leadership abilities in my mind whatsoever. He jeopardized the safety of himself and those officers and other people in that crowd. If he was in control and gave commands and gave direction, those cops took out their asps on their own. The female officer was trying to protect them as they were finally exiting. It's just, it blows my mind, that scene. That's why I want to play the whole thing. It's because he's there, then I don't know where he went. And then he's there and he's futzing around with, I think his shoulder mic fell off, might have been flopping, and he was trying to fix it. The female officer, it looks like, is the one calling for the 85. And, you know, for those who don't know, an 85 is when you call for an emergency assistance for a police officer. And I don't know, I forget which shelter or which, location that was, and how far out help was. You know, hey, if that was Floyd Bennett Field, I don't know if it was. If that was Floyd Bennett Field, help is not close. Help is not close to if that was like the Floyd Bennett Field, right? Or somewhere else. But still, with the 4 cops or 5 cops that you had there, nobody was doing, like Rob had said, that whole process of assessing and directing, and then, coming back around and reassessing. And whether the decision was to retreat, whether the decision was to, push some people back physically, whatever the case may be, there was no direction given to anybody.
In that moment, that sergeant, quote unquote,
no, he's relegated.
Yep, he relegated himself to be nothing more than an observer. No direction given. It's horrible. And Rob Nappy on the comments there, walk him out or drag him out. And if that's your decision, if you're going to stay in there, and you're not gonna let go of this guy, and you're gonna effect an arrest, and you're surrounded like that with what's going on in there, that may have been a viable option, is drag him out and get him out of that environment. But there was no direction given by the supervisor that was there.
Well, whose fault is that, though? Is it the sergeant's? Well, was he trained properly? I don't know. I don't remember ever seeing any training other than the disorder control training that we did when we went over with you, Tony. There's no training like that. There's no scenario based training. There's nothing like that. But we're asking this sergeant to do all of this, so it doesn't prepare you. Just right. Andre's saying the exam doesn't prepare you for the moment you're in, the action, and it should. It really should. There are ways for this department and other departments throughout the country to prepare their personnel for these events. But whether they excuses time constraints or personnel issues or whatever, you could do 1,000 excuses. But when that guy sues and gets, $50,000, $100,000, and everybody else in there gets money, was it worth it? No. The city and departments need to invest in their personnel. And that's what I see what's lacking here.
And I'm going to say that there's fault that's going to go a lot deeper than that sergeant. We talk about the training, the lack of training, so the department's on the hook. But I'm going to say that anybody that knows that sergeant, anybody that was working with that sergeant that day, I will bet my next pension check that not one of them was surprised by his inaction at that scene. Because that sergeant has, I'm sure, unless it was his first day in the command, proven time and again that he is not an adequate leader or supervisor. So the cops are aware of it. The platoon commander is somehow aware of it. The other sergeants are aware of it. And 5 will get you 10 that it has made its way up to the CO, and the CO hasn't addressed it.
So to that point, Ron, I will, I'll tell you that if he has any amount of time whatsoever, like you're saying, as a supervisor, that's not the first time that this has happened where he didn't step up to the plate and make decisions and take control, right? So not only did the job fail that sergeant for not training him and developing any type of leadership skills in him, right? So the job is to blame, but also, like you pointed out, what about the other supervisors that work with him that should be mentoring him, or his platoon commander that should be doing something? And it brings up a point that I remember that happened to me when I was a lieutenant. I had a newly assigned sergeant that came into the precinct, and complete disaster. And I tried my best to take him under my wing and showed him what needs to be done, almost to the point of literally holding his hand to be like, listen, this is what I need you to do when you arrive at the scene of a job. Like, it wasn't so much administrative skills in the house. It was when he was out in the field at the scene of jobs that he was completely failing with the troops and everybody else. And I would time and time again do my best to mentor him and show him what needed to be done and explain to him the gravity of what his role was, that he was going to get cops hurt, he was going to get himself hurt, he was going to get the public hurt, and this is what you needed to do. And as many times as I tried to mentor him, it got to the point, he was a probationary sergeant, it got to the point where I was having meetings with other lieutenants and other supervisors, and we were trying to figure out what needed to be done. He fell directly under me, and I had a meeting with him one day, and I said, listen, I said, you're not leaving me any alternative. If you're not willing to take and pick up what I'm laying down, we're gonna have a problem, and I'm gonna look to either get you out of here and find you an inside job somewhere on this job, because you're not fit to be out on the street with what you're doing, or you're going to be demoted, whatever. It's not in my control. It's in your control, because I'm walking you through this and you're just not getting it. And what ended up happening was he was placed on like some type of a secret squirrel probationary thing, and he ended up getting sent out of the precinct. The CO ended up making some calls, and he was brought back inside and tucked away somewhere, because he just wasn't fit to be out on the street with the cops, right? So it goes back to what we're talking about. Like, it's not just the job that's failing, but us as colleagues and supervisors, we need to step up also and be like, hey, guy, you gotta step up and get this right, because these are critical moments that you're in, and you're gonna get somebody hurt.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron, look, a lot of guys are taking your bet, because they said your next pension check's $20,000. So
listen, I didn't get 3/4. Just for the record, for those who know I was injured, I got denied. I didn't get 3/4, so my pension check ain't looking anything close to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I love what Rob Nappy says. It's a blessing when you're a PO and in some of the details like ESU, narco, plain clothes, and you have that experience already, right? That's a great statement. Unfortunately, everybody can't go into those units, but you can find out stuff about it and learn from those guys. But that's a good point. Again, like I think what Tony's saying is, we're not building that bottom level, right? We're building a house, and we're building it with wood, and we're not putting the cement or proper footings, and that house will way in the wind back and forth. It's not a good thing. We're not building a strong structure here, and it starts from the beginning, starts from the academy, and every rank up.
And I'm going to go back to what Tony was talking about, where I'm going to place some blame on the executives at this point also, because I've done it, and it's not a fun thing to do, because it really affects someone's career. But there are times when people at any rank are new in their position and they're on probation. It is not difficult to extend someone's probation. It's a 49 in an interim evaluation, unfortunately, but like you said, you attempted, and that can't be a thing. They get into the end of their probation. I don't want to do this. Guy sucks, and now I'm going to hammer him. It's like with any evaluation. We talked about this, Rob, in the past about evaluations. They're not fair all the time, and you can't wait until the end of the year to tell somebody they suck by showing them a piece of paper that says they suck. You have to try to correct those conditions, correct those behaviors as they go along. And you described how you tried to mentor and you tried to guide and and then it was just run into a brick wall. Now, I have never been a fan of passing off my problem children. I've always addressed the problems that were put forth in front of me. I didn't think it was fair to just let somebody go or get rid of somebody because, they're not my headache anymore. I didn't believe in that mantra, right? You do what you have to do. You mentor them. You find the right people to put them with. You find the right cop to maybe sit in the car with them. You put them with another sergeant and put them out there, whatever the case may be. But if you have to extend their probation, you have to extend their probation because you know what? They are a liability. Hiding them inside is not always the answer because they're not always going to be inside. Look at what's going on. The inside people are thrown out into the street, into these details, into transit, where things could happen, right? We're going to show a video in a little while from the 123 precinct. Anything could happen at any time, anywhere. And you have to have confidence that the people that are out there are going to take care of business and keep you safe, themselves safe, and then the public safe. So, listen, we're an hour and 30 minutes into it. One second. We're an hour and 30 minutes into it. Let's hit the like. Let's hit the subscribe buttons. Let's keep the algorithm going. We appreciate everybody in the comments. The comments are great. They're fast and furious. Rob Nappi, you're on fire today. Listen, Rob, hit me up on either my ex at 110 Big Guy or through LinkedIn and reach out to us because Rob and I would love to have you on. We're going to do in a little bit. We're going to start doing interviews of retired executives. We'd love to have you on to memorialize your career.
I was going to say the other problem is you can do those interim evaluations, and I strongly suggest it. But it's kind of just prolong the problem because eventually that person will either just okay and comply and get by and get passed and get put on for probation, and you still have a problem. You talked about mentorship. That's an important thing. I know that's also been a study through PMI, and that kind of falls by the wayside because we don't have the personnel to do it, right? You can have a mentorship. Another one of my suggestions is if you have a problematic sergeant and you're a platoon commander, have that sergeant drive you for the night. That might be something to set him up, all right? First of all, he doesn't want to be embarrassed that now he's driving a lieutenant. And the second thing is now you're spending 8 hours with him, and maybe he can learn. There might be other problems, right? We always talk about, oh, you're not a good leader, you're not good at that. But what about home life? Is there something else going on? Take a little interest in that person. I've done that in my previous job. There was a guy who was having problems at home. I literally took him out. I was a supervisor at the time. I took him out. He said he had to get back on time. Sometimes he was working late. So I moved all his assignments so that they were closer. It was for a cable repairman. So he was able to come back every day on time, and his work performance completely changed. So you also gotta be that. I think, Ron, you've said it all the time. That you're not only that, you're that father figure too. You got to take care of that person. That's your son, that's your daughter. You got to take them and make sure they're mentally fine. Okay. And then you can proceed and find the problem. But, dig a little bit too, right? It's always not negative. The always thing was like, interim evaluation, command discipline. No, I always say, talk to the person first and make sure the root of the problem is the person himself, not an external factor, because we don't want to be the guy that beats this person down and then, God forbid, they go out and do something, right? So, it's also important. Mental health and taking care of your personnel is part of being a sergeant. That's another thing. You're the closest person to your squad. All right. So you know your squad better than everybody else. When somebody's off. Oh, Ron doesn't look good today. Last week he hasn't been really his jovial self. Hasn't been joking around. Tony doesn't look happy this week. He's always laughing. You know your people. Work your people too. Also.
Yeah.
So,
anything?
Some more video.
Anything? Yeah. I think I think we've made our point about the negatives. We have one more, Rob, not the one I was just talking to you about. We have one more that I want to just show, and there's a reason I want to show this next one before I get into the one I just texted you about, Rob. Is 14s that got arrested. No, the 14s that got arrested for fighting with the cops. This one is basically, again, there's a lot of cops at a detail, and things get out of hand. And I'm going to let you watch and see what happens with this video, where this is a situation where there is time to act, I think, a lot differently than the way that this video plays out. This video plays out where the sergeant gets involved. Like we've the first video, the sergeant got involved. In the second video, sergeant was completely absent. In this video, we're going to see that the sergeant gets involved, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Just break it up. What are you doing? Stop!
This is a girl. This is a girl, bro. That's a girl. That's crazy.
All right. We'll get back to the video because I wanted to continue to about 2:55, but we'll talk about what we see so far. What did you see so far? I see 20 cops and one sergeant on that corner, right? Maybe 15 cops on that corner. Who snatches the girl once there's a decision to make an arrest? The chevrons, the sergeant. What's your take on what you just saw there, Tony?
Why is the sergeant putting his hands on people when you have that many cops there? Right? That's not what your function is at that scene. Let your cops do the work while you supervise. Plain and simple. Give the order or give the direction to make the arrest and let them do their job.
Listen, all you have to, as a sergeant right there, give specific directions. Tony, you take that, you go grab that guy's right arms. Ron, you go grab that guy's left arms. Rob, watch the back. Specific directions to each person. Don't make it general. Hey, go grab that guy. Then you got 8 guys grabbing a guy. It's got to be specific. Or nobody, right? Because then everybody looks at each other like, oh, me, you, what? You got to be make decisive, direct decisions, and I didn't see any of that. And you can't do that when you're totally engaged, right? How are you making any orders? So yeah.
Right, Jack. Can we get back to that video?
Your man, the officer put his hand around that door on the floor. A man. That shit is whack. That shit is fucking ridiculous, yo. That shit is ridiculous. I need to speak to him. She didn't do nothing.
Now, right there, what I hear in my head is Final Jeopardy. Do 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 do, because nobody's doing anything. Now they have her in custody. They have her up against an RMP. The sergeant is there somewhere. I don't know. Why hasn't that person been, get him out of there? And let's get out of here. And I've said it before, and I've said it on the scene of a melee with Eric on the scene in one of the developments. They had a fight. I responded to an 85 with, when they called an 85, I was out on patrol. I responded to the 85, and we get there. They get the guy in custody. He actually got a CCRB from that case too, but they get the guy in custody, and now we're kind of standing around. And I'm like, let's get out of here. Everybody, let's go, right? The cops want to engage. Everybody's screaming and yelling. And in housing, how fast it could, a crowd can accumulate, right? Let's get out of here because now we're becoming the show. You got the collar. Whatever the reason for the collar is, and the cops didn't seem like, somebody said the cop, female cop didn't want to be engaged. I think it might have been Marlon, but yeah, I don't even know if they knew what they had, right? They got her up against the side of the RP. She's screaming. Other people are screaming and yelling. There's cameras there. There's one guy with a professional camera there, on the sidewalk, and the sergeant's not giving direction. Why isn't the sergeant clearing the crowd away from the cops that have the girl on the RP, having her get in the RP and get the hell out of here? And if you watch the video a little bit further, we're not going to go back to the video. There's actually a cop in the RP. He comes out of the RP. So it's not like, oh, we don't have the keys to this RP, so we're kind of stuck. That RP was accessible. Get the hell out of there.
Listen, you got to worry about stuff coming off the roof. I mean, I don't know if that still continues today, but I think, I remember didn't somebody throw a toilet bowl off the roof and hit a cop, right? I mean, or a bucket, I think also. You got to be very careful. You better be looking up. I mean, and yeah, you've made the arrest. Get off the set. You don't need to be there anymore. It's done. It's over. Yeah, the fastest way to continue with trouble is to stay there because that's only going to get worse.
What do you think, Tony?
Tony, somebody mentioned DCU training earlier. I don't know if you want to make a reference to that. I think it was
Reed.
I forget who said it. They said something about the disorder control training.
Yeah, it was Reed made a comment about when we did DCU training. Everybody, it's the same. We practiced. Everybody had a mission. Everybody had a role, a specific role to do. When we were engaged with crowds, they knew it. They knew what their specific role and mission was. So it's kind of incumbent on frontline supervisors and platoon commanders. They should be discussing this at roll call, though. Like, listen, God, and doing hot washes and debriefs, right? Like for the next roll call. Listen, we had an incident last night on the 4 to 12. This is what happened. This is what I expect of you. This is what we got to do. When you're on the scene, you need to do this. You need to do that. And I don't think any of that is being done anymore. It's just, show up on the scene, get it over with, and get out of there and move on to the next job or whatever. And and as you saw in the video, you're worthless to me if you're just going to stand there and watch. You're not doing anything. And I see some of the comments. I'll go so far as to say, for me personally, in my humble opinion, I don't even think it has anything to do with male or female. Like, there's some female cops that I would take any day over the week over some male cops. So I don't even think it's a gender thing. I just think it's either you're a cop or you're not a cop, right? And if you're not, what are the frontline supervisors doing about it to either mentor them or reprimand them or engage them to be like, listen, that's part of the problem also, which is why it's so important that frontline supervisors step up and lead and take control of the situation. And then after that scene that we just watched is over, if I'm the supervisor on the scene, I wouldn't have done what happened, but if I was the supervisor on the scene and I'm looking around trying to give direction and I see some of my cops standing there doing nothing, not there in the moment, obviously, but after that job is over, a big piece of your ass is going to be in my mouth because I'm chewing you the fuck out, right? Like, that's not happening again. And I don't know that that's being done either by these supervisors.
Right. The problem, Tony, is he was giving those direction. He took action, handed off the body, and then I didn't see him again. And you'll see him come back into the scene a little bit later, but everybody's just standing around. They're not getting that direction, you know? Yeah. So it's just another example of how the supervisor should have given the direction. He goes, Ron, Tony, girl in the white shirt, whatever the case may be, go, you know? And listen, I'm all about, I have no problem. I've been involved myself personally in scuffles and gotten out and gotten involved and gotten hands-on. But that's in an emergent situation where there wasn't enough people, you know? And it's not cowardice to be the supervisor to stand back when you have enough people, because when you have a dog pile, it's worse for the cops involved in that dog pile, especially now when you talk about the ramifications of possibly the diaphragm law and everything else that we've talked about in our private show. So listen, we've shown a lot of what we think that people are lacking in supervision. And like I said in the beginning, it was tough, but we found a couple of videos, and Rob was digging deep and found one of an incident in the 115 precinct. So let's put that one up. This is a fire scene where some guys on patrol get flagged down for a fire in a multiple-story building, multiple dwellings, and the sergeant and I think 3 or 4 cops.
I think it was a lieutenant, yeah.
Who took on the role of firefighters, rescuing people from a burning apartment in Queens. Their body camera video shows the harrowing moments in Elmhurst last month. Eyewitness News reporter Crystal Cranmore spoke with the heroes.
Nearly a month after the fire, these officers are speaking out about their heroic actions that led them to this building and saved a middle-aged woman from a fire. Police officers kicked this door down and were hit with thick smoke before entering this apartment on 95th Street and 37th Avenue in Jackson Heights.
We formed a single file line where we all held on to each other so that we couldn't lose each other.
Police say bikes and cars blocked the doorway, trapping a middle-aged woman inside during a fire July 19th. They quickly located her and escorted her to safety.
Thank you very much for getting me, kept me alive. For him, I don't know what.
The resident, identified as Carmen Davila, says a lithium-ion battery charging her nephew's e-bike exploded, causing the fire. Officer Devontae Morris located a fire extinguisher in the hallway and used it to put out the ball of flames in the living room.
Heart was beating, racing, didn't know what to do at first. But as soon as I got upstairs to the 5th floor and seen all the water, I just knew I had to do something.
Police got the call just before 11 o'clock that evening while they were on patrol nearby.
So what?
The officers did.
See, that's a prime example of the sergeant. He came up with a plan. I mean, a plan that we're not taught, really, right? I mean, really, we're told not really to even kind of stay away from fires. I mean, there have been a couple incidences where police officers got stuck in an elevator. I think that was out in Brooklyn that ended up getting a lot of smoke inhalation. So these guys go well and above beyond their duties. But the best thing is that the sergeant comes up with a plan. He takes the lead and says, we're going to hold each other. We're going to stick together. This is the plan that we're going forward. So everybody understood it. And what happens? It's a successful rescue and it's a successful operation. So, I mean, I think that's one good thing that sergeant, he really did well. And it was on the cuff too, right? I mean, really, we don't practice that. We don't know that, but maybe he has prior experiences as a volunteer or whatever the case may be. He came up with a plan and he executed it, and it was a great job.
Tony?
No, I agree with everything. Bob said. It stepped up, made a plan, and it executed and worked out well. And that's exactly what we need these supervisors to do. I will. I'll just add, because I know we're probably getting close to time. But one of the other things that I wanted to bring up was, one of, like, for the cops that are out there, some advice that I would give, because I've seen some of the one of the biggest pitfalls that I've seen with newly promoted cops to sergeants when they make that transition. Inherently, their instinct is they're now in a new command and they are one day older than they were when they were a cop, right? And now they're a new boss, and their instinct tells them, I want to be liked. I want to be liked by my cops, right? I want to be liked. Don't like this. This is, and you disagree, agree. It doesn't matter. This is just my opinion. I wasn't out there to be liked. You respect me for who I am. That's great. I'd rather be respected than liked. And I see a lot of newly minted sergeants make the mistake of getting way too close with their cops and doing things with their cops that they shouldn't be doing, all for the sake of, I want to be liked. You got to be out there and you got to be a leader. You're in a new role now. You're not out there. You shouldn't be going out. In my opinion, you shouldn't be going out drinking with your guys. I understand you want to have morale. You want to have that esprit de corps. There's other ways to go about it than getting that close with your cops, and getting them to like you, right? If you're respected by your cops, they will like you. You don't do things to compromise your own ethics and integrity, in order to be liked,
And listen, a good sergeant knows when to leave the party, and
Exactly.
doesn't stay to the end, right? Knows when to leave the baseball game, knows when to do all those things. Also, a good sergeant doesn't complain about the department and procedures to their subordinates. All right. If you remember Saving Private Ryan, one of them said to the captain, "Captain, what's your beef with this army?" And he goes, "Soldier," I forget the soldier's name, because I don't complain down, I complain up. And that's what it is. You represent the department, and it's hard not to complain about it, but don't make your complaints go down. Hey, if I'm a cop, I got to listen to the sergeant's complaint. And I'm like, man, that guy, all he does is complain. I don't want to hear, the cop doesn't want to hear your complaints. The cop's got enough complaints of their own, right? They don't want to hear the sergeants. Complaints go up. If the sergeant has a problem, tell the lieutenant. Lieutenant has a problem, tell the captain. If the inspector has a problem, don't tell the chief, because the chief don't care. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, a couple of things, right? That, like what you're both saying. One thing I was taught early on: when the shots start flowing, the bosses better start going, right? You don't want to be around. You let them have their space, let them have their thing. And I always talk about, Rob, you brought it up earlier. I talk about, almost like being a parent, because it's our job as parents to do what? To make the right decisions, right? Not the popular decisions. And Simply E has a comment in here, and I'm going to appreciate the comment. It says, this is the reason why I encourage the young guys to listen to this podcast. The knowledge from the experience that they will gain, the knowledge from experience that they would gain is invaluable. A lot of them have come to appreciate this podcast. I appreciate that comment. And Rob and I talk about it all the time, that we're here, and the purpose of our podcast is to help. It's not to sit here and have a conversation. Hey, listen, it's therapeutic for everybody to sit around and talk, right? We laugh, we joke. But the seriousness is to give you a perspective from an executive's viewpoint and vantage point, which you don't normally get to see, right? Normally, if you're interacting with an executive, it's in a negative way. So those are some important things. And yeah, you gotta let the cops be cops and have their time and do their thing. And sometimes it's and then there's Rafael Martinez. Thanks for the for the donation. Inspector Raganella, you took a card from me in the academy when you did the disorder control training. You said I did not shave. I did shave. Well, now you don't have to worry about it. Give him his card back because you don't even have to shave anymore.
Raphael, if it's any consolation, those cards were never turned in. When I used to do the disorder control training and take cards, it was all show. I never turned them in, so you never got credit for that.
Yeah, and Land of Make Believe is saying you guys policed in a different time, though. Well, we did and we didn't. We were police officers in a different time. Yes, we were in a different era, but we don't forget what it was like to be a police officer. We also, as executives, know what it was like, and we have empathy for what's going on in today's policing. And that's another reason why we're here, to try and guide people and talk about current situations, talk about things that we think you want to hear. If there's other things you want to hear about, throw them in the comments. We're always open to topics for future shows. And, we appreciate the input. We want to talk about the things that you want to hear about. We don't want to talk about what we want to hear about. We're talking about what we believe that you want to hear about and that you should hear about from an executive's vantage point that you don't normally get to hear in order to help you. Because if we're talking about something negative, we don't want to talk about it to be negative. We want to talk about something negative to help you find a positive resolution to what's going on in a negative way.
I just want to thank everybody today. The comments were excellent. Tony, thanks again for sitting in for me. I appreciate it. You did a great job as always. Appreciate your help. Ron, always good to hear from you. You have anything, Tony, you want to throw, and then we'll throw it back to Ron at the end? You good? Ron?
No, I think I'm good. I'll just say, that
Tony, before we wrap it up, hold on one second. Before we wrap it up, I do want to show that one last video,
yes,
Rob, because I think it's important. Okay. I think it's important. It's an MOS involved. I'm sorry, guys, but it's an MOS involved shooting that happened in the 123 precinct. So once again, anything can happen at any time, anywhere. You think the 123 precinct? They talk about it's the screen door precinct. They got a screen door on the front door of the precinct because it's so relaxed and not much is going on out the ass end of Tottenville and Staten Island, and that's not always the case. So there was an incident where these officers got involved, and the sergeant was not on the scene yet. So the sergeant was given directions from the radio as he was responding. So he took the information he had available to him, and he gave him directions to the officers as he was responding to the scene.
Show me your hand! Drop the fucking gun!
Central, shots fired at Home Depot. Shots fired at Home Depot.
Drop the fucking gun! Show me your hand now!
So you hear the sergeant giving the directions to watch for crossfire and to be careful, as well as requesting additional resources, requesting ESU, requesting aviation. The cops there, they didn't request aviation, they didn't request ESU. They're facing an adversary who had actually, if you watch it, the video, it's available on YouTube. He let a couple of rounds go in the air as the officers entered the parking lot. So that's why they were saying there were shots fired. I just thought it was important that we speak about that, because that's another aspect of supervision that isn't shown in these videos, because it's difficult, and it's very important that you don't have to be on the scene to take control of a scene, and that was proven right there. So go ahead, give us some of your final thoughts, and we'll wrap it up.
No, I'll just say, just listen, we need if I could have it my way, we would have leadership development right from the first day you walk into the academy, and the job would be doing the right thing to develop leaders, because I think it would change the culture of the department in a positive way, right? We need to mentor, and when we do become bosses, we need to, take other supervisors under our wing and mentor them, and just, look out for your cops, and just be a boss, man. You get there, make decisions, take control of the scenes, and supervise the way you would want to be supervised, and you'll be good to go. And thank you guys for having me on again. I appreciate it. Keep up the great podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks again, Tony. Thanks, Ron. I think as a supervisor, as a sergeant, if you really want that job and you studied hard for it, learn it, and get as much information as you can. If the job doesn't provide it, then read some of those important books like Colin Powell and things like that. Learn it on your own, and you'll be a better person for it.
Yeah, listen, again, appreciate the comments. Tony, thank you very much for offering to step up and coming in, and for your input today. I think it was a great conversation that we were able to have, great information that we got out. I think, what you don't hear in BMOC, you're going to hear here. You're going to hear the truth. We're not showing these videos to point out anybody specific. We've talked about it in the past. When you're Monday morning quarterbacking, you're not doing it to be critical. You're doing it to prevent those incidents from repeating themselves in the future. It's like history. If you don't know about it, you're going to repeat it. So thank you very much, everybody, for the comments. We appreciate everybody for the support. Hit that like, hit that share, hit that subscribe. Tomorrow, 12:05 on The Finest Unfiltered, you have Sal Greco show. And then again on Friday, you'll have Eric and John with a roundtable. I'm not sure who the two other guests are going to be for the roundtable on Friday at 08:05. And we'll be back next Wednesday at 5:05 p.m. with the Executive's Perspective. Everybody be safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you.